So if you read all of the reports on the interwebs about plant medicines like ayahuasca, um, you read a lot of miracles, a lot of incredible, miraculous experiences of healing, and you know, expansive interconnectedness, and all of this beauty. And it's all true. It's all unequivocally true. However, there are some pretty substantial risks associated with working with plant medicines. And in order to mitigate those risks, we need more awareness around what is possible, because the psychedelic revolution is like trying to purport that these plants, these medicines, are miracle cures, and they're not. They are catalysts for change, and they can help us co-create miracles, but there are very severe risks associated with that, and there has to be, right? Everything should be in balance. For something to have the power to help us heal PTSD, cancer, etc., it's also going to have the associated risks because of the intensity. So I'm here today to share in two categories some of the core risks: physical risks and psychological risks. Physical risks are fairly well documented and straightforward. The biggest things we need to be aware of when we work with plant medicines, ayahuasca in particular, is medications that we're on. There are many medications that they're just contraindicative to working with her. The biggest classification of medications that we know can be very dangerous are MAOIs and SSRIs, so antidepressants. Because ayahuasca herself is an MAOI, adding in additional elements of that can cause serotonin syndrome and all kinds of really nasty side effects that just are, they're rarely deadly, but they can be. So most of us feel no need to risk it. So it's really important to be very aware of all the medications that you're taking and to communicate those to the guide you're working with to ensure that there's no inherent danger. There are also some conditions, some pre-existing physical conditions that don't mix well with plant medicines. A big one is blood pressure, high blood pressure, or any past issues with the heart. Because, the way you want to think of it is that when you take these medicines, it's like being on a wild roller coaster ride. And if your body can't handle that intensity, it is not safe to work with plant medicines, at least not in ceremonial doses, because it can be akin to that sort of intensity, heart rate increase, blood pressure, etc. So that is a good rule of thumb. And so people with these pre-existing conditions are usually advised to not take large doses of plant medicines in order to stay safe. There's also, anybody with a history of fainting or a history of seizures, not accident induced, but like as a result of something like epilepsy, because the medicines can trigger an epileptic episode. And the biggest issue, especially with ayahuasca, is that if you're in a seizure and you purge, you can actually choke on your own purge. And so it's very rare that centers and retreats will accept people with a history of seizures, simply because it's not typically possible to have staff watching every single moment of a ceremony for somebody that has this history. Doesn't mean you can't microdose, just means that being very careful with ceremonial doses is essential. So those are some of the key physical things to be aware of. What's really much more mysterious and prevalent are the psychological risks associated with plant medicines. The first one, and it's getting worse and worse, is expectations. People are, reading these accounts on the web and going into these experiences with just these massive expectations. And again, it's not to say that miracles aren't possible. It's just that the expectations are attachments. And when we're attached to a certain outcome, the medicines have a way of hiding from that, because they're in part teaching us to trust and to listen to the suffering, the disease, the things that we have, and not to chase like a cure or a resolution. And so there's a lot of heartbreak, confusion, and blaming the plants themselves when the aftermath of these experiences don't meet the expectation. There's a really hard balance that we create. We want to be in the space of intention, giving it possibility that we can experience profound, incredible things, but at the same time, not to be attached and to expect it. That's a very different energy. Intentions, a prayer is different than a this better happen or else. So that's a big psychological ramification that's happening in the psychedelic space right now, is there's a lot of people really hurt and upset because their expectations were not met. We also can experience emotional destabilization in the aftermath of working with these medicines. That is typically temporary, but the more that we feel as though something is wrong and we blame the medicines for harming us rather than understanding that they're revealing something that was already there, and learning to navigate through the destabilization rather than to take what the Western world typically does and be labeled that you're broken. This is key, because these plants bring things to the surface, our wounding, our traumas, the relationship we have with our egos and our minds. And so sometimes things get worse before they get better. But because we go in with the expectations and thinking we're going to be fixed, if we come out the other side and things feel less stable, more fear, etc., it's very easy to think something has gone horribly wrong when this is just the nuances and the complexities of the healing process. So know that it is possible that you can feel more destabilized before you find the tools and the just the groundedness, the interconnectedness to work with powerful emotions, and to know that that's just a rite of passage. There's also, this is somewhat rare, but it happens where you can go into essentially an experience of fracturing or a psychosis of sorts. Now, psychosis in its very true definition in the psychological sense is temporary, but an extremely intense experience with plant medicines where they're trying to take us to a place that we're resisting and afraid of, it can create an experience of mental fracturing, which just means that we dissociate, or we completely schism, and there's a piece of us that doesn't come back in to a grounded state after an episode with medicines. And this requires usually medical intervention, or at least a safe place, an opportunity to move through this fracturing. Again, it's almost always temporary. In fact, every single time I've witnessed this, it's been temporary, but it's a super vulnerable, very shaky place to be in. And if you don't know that it's possible that these things can happen, you might feel that you've gone completely crazy. And you're not. You're just moving through tremendous trauma and wounding. But we need to acknowledge that this is a very real possibility when we work with these powerful beings. There's also the danger of ego inflation. We see this a lot in the plant medicine spiritual communities. Ayahuasca and her plant friends will continue to inflate narcissistic egos like a balloon until they pop. And we never know when that process will happen. So there's a lot of God complex. There's a lot of I've drank medicine 10 times and now I'm a shaman because ayahuasca told me. And I never want to be raining on anybody's calling to do this incredible work. But if you're doing it with your ego, it's incredibly dangerous. And it's incredibly reckless. And the medicines sometimes support this. They just do. They sometimes mirror this in order for us to have a deeper experience of this delusion. So that's a very real possibility. So is the experience of feeling alienated. This is something I still go through, is after, getting to travel the multiverse with these medicines, coming back and standing in line at Starbucks and witnessing mass consciousness and all the things that's happening, it can be devastating. The contrast of those spaces can be incredibly difficult. That's why, we need community. We need to be in relationship with people who are doing similar work and that they get these sorts of experiences so that we don't feel alone and that we don't spiral in that feeling that we don't belong here, because we all belong here because we're here. But it sure can feel hard to relate to just the darkness and the separation and just the lack of kindness that is happening on a large scale right now due to fear and the place we're at in our evolution. You can also have the danger of making very poor decisions in the aftermath of medicines, which is why we always advise people take at least a few weeks to make major decisions like changes in relationships and jobs and moving and, the big things in our lives. It may feel urgent when we come out of a ceremony that I got to break up with my boyfriend, But unless you're in actual physical danger, it is really wise to take some time, let that intensity sort of ground in, and then feel what is most appropriate in terms of life choices. And lastly, it is true that the medicines can also activate sort of latent experiences of depression, panic, fear, that sort of thing. As I was saying before, they can bring these things to the surface. They're not causing experiences of grief or depression. They are wringing us out like a rag, and letting us have the experience of these emotions. But that's why, it's important to know it can get worse before it gets better. But to know that these experiences, the spectrum of emotions that we all have access to, it's part of what we came to do. It's what our souls want in terms of learning the incredible gift of duality, but it's bloody difficult. And the plants don't apologize for the fact that it's sometimes bloody difficult. And to know that these risks are possible, but they're part of the gifts that allow us this whole expansion and understanding of consciousness and opportunity to heal. So I hope this information in no way deters you from wanting to have these experiences, whether it's your first time or 100, but to be educated in what is possible and to know how to support yourself through the aftermath. And if you need any help with any of this stuff, please reach out to myself or any of our team members at plantmedicinepeople.com. Subscribe to our channel below. We give free content like this all the time. We just want to support people in this process, keep everyone safe, and bring us into the really good stuff that these medicines have the potential to offer us. Much love. Thanks for listening.